The station clock ticked with a merciless rhythm, each second a hammer blow against the fragile shell of hope Maya had carefully constructed. Rain lashed against the grand, arched windows of the terminal, blurring the city lights into a watercolor of despair. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of damp wool, hot coffee, and the collective anxiety of 100 delayed journeys. Maya clutched her ticket, a flimsy rectangle of paper that felt as heavy as a gravestone. It was the last ticket on the 7:42 p.m. express to Northwood, the last chance she had to make it to the most important job interview of her life. A voice, sharp and laced with entitlement, sliced through the din. "What do you mean, there are no more seats? I have to be on that train." A woman in a tailored coat, her face a mask of indignation, jabbed a manicured finger at the beleaguered station agent. "Check again." Maya shrank back, the woman's venomous tone making her own desperation feel small, almost shameful. For weeks, this interview had been her North Star. It wasn't just a job at a prestigious architecture firm. It was a lifeline. It was the money for her mother's next round of treatment, the rent for their tiny apartment, the possibility of a future that wasn't defined by the constant, gnawing fear of debt. She had spent her last savings on this ticket, a gamble that felt more reckless with every passing moment. Then she saw them, a man and a little girl, huddled near a pillar, looking as lost and weary as she felt. The man's clothes were simple, worn at the cuffs and faded at the knees. His face, etched with lines of exhaustion, was softened only by the concern in his eyes as he looked down at the child. The little girl, no older than 6, had her face buried in his coat, her small shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Her hair was a tangle of dark curls, and a small, worn teddy bear was clutched in her hand. "Just one more sleep, Lilybug," the man murmured, his voice a low, soothing rumble that was nearly lost in the station's chaos. "I promise, we'll be with Grandma soon." His words, meant for his daughter, struck a chord deep inside Maya. Grandma. The word conjured an image of her own mother, her face pale against the hospital pillows, her smile strained but always, always there. The doctor's words from yesterday echoed in her mind. "The new medication is expensive, Maya. We need to start it as soon as possible." The final boarding call for the 7:42 p.m. express blared over the speakers, a screech of finality. The woman in the tailored coat swore under her breath, storming away. The crowd surged towards the gate, a river of people flowing towards their destinations, their lives, their futures. Maya's feet felt rooted to the spot. Her future was through that gate, her mother's future, but her gaze kept returning to the father and his weeping child. She saw the tremor in the man's hands as he tried to comfort his daughter, the utter defeat in the slump of his shoulders when he looked at the departures board, now flashing departed next to every train but hers. He looked like a man at the very end of his rope, and in that moment, Maya didn't see a stranger. She saw her own father, years ago, working 2 jobs, his face permanently shadowed with fatigue, all to give her a chance at a life he never had. He had collapsed from exhaustion one day, and their world had tilted on its axis. He never fully recovered. A war raged within her. The pragmatist, the scared daughter, screamed at her to walk away, to get on that train, to save herself. But another voice, a quieter one that sounded an awful lot like her father's, whispered of a different kind of strength. What was the point of building a new future on a foundation of regret? With a deep, shuddering breath that felt like it was tearing her in two, she began to walk. Not towards the gate, but towards the pillar, towards the tired man and his crying child. He looked up as she approached, his eyes wary, guarded. "Excuse me," she said, her voice barely audible. She cleared her throat. I overheard. You need to get to Northwood." He nodded slowly, pulling his daughter closer. "Yeah, my mother, she's not well. We were supposed to be there yesterday, but our car broke down. We spent everything we had on a bus that got canceled. This was our last shot." His story was a mirror of her own, cracked and distorted, but the same pain reflected back. Her decision, which had felt impossible moments before, now felt like the only choice she could possibly make. It was an act of madness, an act of self-sabotage. But what no one in that bustling station realized, what Maya herself could not possibly comprehend, was that this single, impulsive act of kindness was about to unravel a hidden world of immense wealth, profound secrets, and a past that was intertwined with her own in the most staggering of ways. This was not just giving up a train ticket. It was stepping onto a different track entirely, one that would lead her to a truth far more shocking and transformative than any job interview ever could. The man's name, he said, was Elias. He didn't offer a last name, and Maya didn't ask for one. In the transactional anonymity of the train station, first names were enough. His daughter was Lily. As Maya held out the ticket, her hand trembled. "Here," she said, the word catching in her throat. "You take it. It's the last one." Elias stared at the ticket, then at her face, his brow furrowed in disbelief. "I can't. You were in the queue. This is yours." "My meeting was rescheduled," Maya lied, the words tasting like ash. "It's fine. Really. Your daughter, she needs to see her grandmother." She looked at Lily, whose tear-streaked face was now peeking out from her father's coat. Maya offered a small, watery smile. "Grandmas are very important." The conflict in Elias's eyes was palpable. It was a storm of pride, desperation, and suspicion. In his world, kindness was a currency, and it always came with a price. He had learned that lesson the hard way, in boardrooms that were far more brutal than this chaotic station. He had built an empire on the principle of quid pro quo, of calculated risks and merciless leverage. Unconditional generosity was a myth, a fairy tale he'd stopped believing in long ago. "I don't have any money to pay you for it," he said, his voice flat, testing her. "Not until I get to my mother's." "I'm not asking for money," Maya insisted, pushing the ticket closer to him. "Please. The train is leaving." The final boarding call sounded, sharp and impatient. It was now or never. With a look of profound, conflicted gratitude, Elias finally took the ticket. His calloused fingers brushed against hers, a fleeting touch that sent an odd, unexpected jolt through her. For a split second, she felt an inexplicable sense of connection, a strange hum of recognition that she quickly dismissed as a trick of her overwrought nerves. "Thank you," he said, the words heavy with an emotion he couldn't quite name. I don't know what to say." "Just go," Maya urged, stepping back. "Go." He scooped Lily into his arms and, without another word, turned and ran towards the gate, the precious ticket clutched in his hand. Lily looked over his shoulder, her wide, dark eyes fixed on Maya. Just before they disappeared through the gate, the little girl lifted her hand and gave a small, hesitant wave. Her other hand still held the worn teddy bear, and then they were gone. The gate slid shut. The train hissed, groaned, and began to pull away from the station, its lights carving a path through the rain-soaked darkness. Maya stood alone on the platform, the noise of the station fading into a dull roar in her ears. She was left with nothing but the echo of a child's wave and the cold, hard reality of what she had just done. She had given away her future. The adrenaline that had propelled her forward drained away, replaced by a hollow, sickening dread. The weight of her sacrifice crashed down on her. The interview, the job, her mother. Oh God, her mother. She sank onto a nearby bench, the cold plastic seeping through her thin coat. The station, once a place of frantic energy, now felt vast and empty, a monument to her catastrophic decision. A single, hot tear traced a path down her cold cheek. What had she done? To understand the magnitude of that question, you have to understand who Maya really was. She wasn't just a kind stranger. She was a survivor, forged in the crucible of loss and responsibility. Her father, a brilliant but unappreciated draftsman, had taught her to see the world not just as it was, but as it could be. He would spread blueprints across their small kitchen table, his pencil flying, designing dream homes for people who would never know his name. "Every line has a purpose, Maya," he would say, his voice filled with a passion that belied their humble circumstances. "Architecture is about creating shelter, not just for the body, but for the soul." He poured all his dreams for a better life into her. He worked himself to the bone, saving every spare dollar for her education. But the stress was a slow poison. The heart attack that took him was sudden, brutal, and it left a gaping hole in their lives that could never be filled. Maya was only 16. Overnight, she became the pillar of their tiny, shattered family. Her mother, A gentle woman who had always been the heart of their home, crumbled under the weight of grief and the sudden, crushing burden of financial survival. Her health began a slow, steady decline, a cascade of ailments that doctors attributed to stress and a broken heart. Maya put her own dreams on hold. The prestigious architecture school she had been accepted to became a forgotten fantasy. Instead, she took on odd jobs, waitressing, data entry, anything to keep them afloat. She enrolled in night classes at a community college, studying drafting and design, trying to keep her father's legacy alive in the quiet hours after her mother was asleep. She was a ghost in her own life, haunting the edges of the future she was supposed to have. The job at Sterling Cross Architecture was meant to be her resurrection. It wasn't just any firm. It was the most innovative design house in the country, known for its sustainable, community-focused projects. It was a place where her father's ideals, creating shelter for the soul, were put into practice. Landing an interview there felt like a sign, a whisper from her father across the veil. She had poured weeks into her portfolio, sacrificing sleep, her sketches filled with a desperate, brilliant energy. This wasn't just about the money. It was about reclaiming a piece of the life that had been stolen from her. It was about proving to herself that her father's sacrifice, and her own, had not been in vain. Now, sitting on that cold bench, all of that was gone. The portfolio in her bag felt like a book of dead dreams. The next train to Northwood, the station agent informed her with a shrug, wasn't until morning, and it was already fully booked. The storm was getting worse, and all bus services were suspended indefinitely. She was stranded, trapped. She pulled out her phone, her fingers fumbling with the cold screen. She had to call her mother, to tell her she wouldn't be coming home tonight. She had to call the firm, to cancel the interview and listen to the polite, dismissive, "We'll keep your resume on file." That was the corporate equivalent of a death sentence. Her thumb hovered over her mother's contact photo, a picture of her smiling in the garden, back when her eyes still held a spark of light. How could she tell her she had failed? How could she explain that she had given their last hope away to a complete stranger? What would anyone do in this moment? It's a question we often ask ourselves from a safe distance. But for Maya, the moment was here, and the consequences were very, very real. She had made her choice, guided by an impulse she was beginning to deeply regret. As the station's cleaning crew began their nightly rounds, their machines humming a mournful tune, Maya buried her face in her hands. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of the relentless rain and her own quiet, hopeless sobs. She didn't know it yet, but her act of kindness had set off a silent alarm in a world she couldn't imagine. And the man she knew as Elias was already beginning to unravel the lie she had told him. Meanwhile, on the 7:42 p.m. express train to Northwood, Caspian Thorne, the man Maya knew as Elias, settled his daughter, Lily, into a window seat. The plush fabric and clean, quiet interior of the first-class cabin were a stark contrast to the chaos of the station. He had used the ticket Maya gave him, but only to get through the gate. A quiet word with the conductor and the flash of a discreet, platinum card had secured them this private compartment. The original ticket, the one that had cost Maya her future, lay on the small table between them. "Is that lady an angel, Daddy?" Lily asked, her voice small. She had finally stopped crying, her attention captured by the rain-streaked scenery whipping past the window. Caspian looked at his daughter, his heart clenching with a familiar mix of love and inadequacy. "Why would you say that, Lilybug?" "Because she was sad, but she helped us anyway," Lily said with the simple, profound logic of a child. "Angels are sad because they see everyone else is sad, but they still help." Caspian had no answer. He was the CEO of Thorne Industries, a global tech conglomerate worth billions. His name was synonymous with power, innovation, and a ruthless efficiency that had crushed competitors and made him one of the most formidable figures in the corporate world. He could buy and sell entire companies with a single phone call. He could shape markets and influence governments. But he couldn't answer his 6-year-old daughter's question. He couldn't explain the look in Maya's eyes, this whole charade. The worn clothes, the fabricated story of a broken-down car, was his therapist's idea. Dr. Alastair Finch, a man with kind eyes and an exorbitant hourly rate, had called it a grounding exercise. Caspian's wife, Elena, had passed away a year ago, a sudden illness that had ripped the soul out of his meticulously ordered world. Since then, he had become a ghost in his own life, rattling through his vast, empty mansion, communicating with his daughter through nannies and schedules. He was failing her, and he knew it. "You've lost touch, Caspian," Dr. Finch had said. "With your daughter, with yourself. You live in a bubble of wealth and power. You need to remember what it's like to be normal, to be vulnerable. Take Lily too. Visit your mother. But do it without the private jet, without the assistance, without the name. Be Elias, the struggling father. Connect with your daughter. Connect with the world." It had sounded ridiculous, a piece of performative nonsense. But the desperation to reconnect with Lily, to see a genuine smile on her face again instead of the polite, distant one she gave him, had made him agree. He thought it would be an adventure, a story they would laugh about later. He hadn't anticipated the grinding reality of it. The bus breaking down wasn't part of the plan, but it had happened. The cancellations, the delays, the crushing feeling of helplessness, that was all horrifyingly real. He had felt a flicker of genuine panic back there, a feeling he hadn't experienced since his company's near bankruptcy in its early days. And then Maya had appeared. She hadn't just given them a ticket. She had looked at him and seen not a billionaire in disguise, but a fellow human being in pain. Her lie, "My meeting was rescheduled," had been so transparent, yet so powerful. He had seen the truth in the slump of her shoulders as she walked away. She hadn't just been delayed. She had been derailed. He picked up his phone, a sleek, custom-built device that was a universe away from Maya's cracked screen model. He dialed a number from memory. "Arthur," he said, his voice dropping back into its usual tone of command. "I have a situation." Arthur Vance was Caspian's head of security and de facto chief of staff, a man who could solve any problem with quiet, lethal efficiency. "Sir, I thought we agreed on no contact. Change of plans. I need you to find someone. A woman at the Grand Central Terminal. Her name is Maya. I don't have a last name. Early 20s, dark hair, wearing a gray coat. She was supposed to be on the 742 Express to Northwood, but gave her ticket to me." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Gave it to you, sir? Just find her, Arthur. Use the station's security footage. I need to know everything about her. Why she was going to Northwood. What she gave up. Everything. And Arthur, be discreet. No one can know I was there. Consider it done, sir." Caspian ended the call and looked at the ticket on the table. A simple piece of paper that now felt like a contract, a debt he was morally obligated to repay. Lily's words echoed in his mind. "Angels are sad because they see everyone else's. Sad, but they still help." He was beginning to understand. He had orchestrated this exercise to feel vulnerable, to feel normal. But Maya's selfless act had shown him a depth of humanity he had long forgotten existed. He had wanted to teach his daughter about the real world. But it was this stranger, this woman who had sacrificed her own hope for theirs, who was teaching him. And the lesson was just beginning. Back at the station, Maya's phone rang, jolting her from her stupor. It was the firm, Sterling Cross. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She had to answer. She had to face the music. "Hello?" she managed, her voice hoarse. "Is this Maya?" "Ah, Rostova," a crisp, professional voice asked. "Yes, this is she." The use of her full name felt so formal, so final. "This is Catherine from Sterling Cross. Architecture. We were expecting you for your 9 a.m. interview tomorrow. I'm calling to confirm." I'm so sorry," Maya stammered, the apology feeling woefully inadequate. "There's been an emergency. I'm not going to be able to make it. I'm stranded out of town." "Oh," Catherine said. There was a pause. Maya braced herself for the inevitable brush-off. "Well, that is unfortunate. Mr. Sterling was very much looking forward to meeting you. Your portfolio made quite an impression." The words were a fresh stab of pain. He had been looking forward to it. It had been real. "I understand. I am so incredibly sorry for the inconvenience." "Hold on a moment, Maya," Catherine said, her tone shifting slightly. Maya could hear muffled typing in the background. "The storm is quite severe, isn't it? We've had a few cancellations. Tell you what, Mr. Sterling's 10:30 has also just canceled. If you could make it by then, the slot is yours." Hope, fierce and unexpected, surged through Maya. 10:30. That was a 12-hour reprieve. "Really? You would do that?" "As I said, your portfolio was impressive. Mr. Sterling doesn't impress easily. We'll pencil you in for 10:30. But, Maya, I have to be clear. We can't move it again. We have candidates flying in from all over the country. I'll be there, Maya said, a new determination hardening her voice. I promise. Thank you. Thank you so much. She hung up the phone, her mind racing. She had a second chance. A slim, almost impossible chance, but it was there. The trains were booked. The buses were canceled. The storm was raging. But she had 12 hours. She looked around the deserted station. How on earth was she going to get to Northwood? She refused to let that question defeat her. She had been given a reprieve. A miracle. She wouldn't waste it. She pulled her portfolio closer, as if it were a shield. She had to find a way. For her mother. For her father. For herself. Her long, dark night was far from over. But for the first time in hours, she could see a flicker of dawn up Maya's mind. Kicked into overdrive. The train was out. The bus was out. A cab would cost hundreds of dollars she didn't have. Her eyes scanned the desolate station, searching for any option, any possibility she might have missed. She spotted a dusty corner of the terminal she hadn't noticed before, where a few tired-looking travelers were slumped over tables at a 24-hour truck stop-style diner. It was a long shot, but truckers often traveled long distances. Maybe, one was heading north. The diner was a greasy spoon-time capsule, smelling of stale coffee and fried onions. Maya approached the counter, where a burly man with a magnificent gray beard was nursing a mug of coffee. His jacket had a patch for a logistics company. "Excuse me," she said, her voice small. "I'm sorry to bother you, but are you by any chance heading north? Towards Northwood?" The trucker, whose name tag read Gus, looked her up and down with a weary but not unkind eye. "Northwood? Honey, I'm heading east to the coast. But you look like you're in a real bind." Maya's shoulders slumped. "I am. I have a life-or-death job interview in the morning. All the trains and buses are canceled." Gus took a long sip of his coffee, contemplating. "The storm's a bad one. Nobody's going to be in a hurry to drive through it. But my buddy, Sal, he's making a parts run up to a factory just outside of Crestwood. That's about 30 miles south of Northwood. He's leaving in an hour. 30 miles. It might as well be 300. How would she get from Crestwood to Northwood at dawn in a storm? But it was better than nothing. It was a chance. Could you ask him if he'd be willing to take a passenger?" Gus grunted, pulling out a battered flip phone. He made a quick call, a series of gruff ahas and yes. He hung up and looked at her. "He'll do it. Says the company's good. But he's a stickler for rules. No funny business. He'll drop you at the Crestwood exit. That's it." "Thank you," Maya breathed, relief washing over her. "Thank you so much." "Don't thank me yet," Gus said, his expression serious. "Sal's a good guy, but it's a rough road. You be careful." The next hour was a blur of waiting. Maya bought a coffee, with the last few dollars in her wallet, and sat in a booth, her portfolio clutched to her chest. She called her mother, forcing a cheerful tone into her voice. "Hi, Mom. Just calling to say I'm staying with a friend from college tonight to get an early start. The storm is pretty bad here." The lie felt heavy, but telling her the truth would only cause her to worry, and stress was the last thing her mother needed. Finally, a short, wiry man named Sal appeared, and with a nod to Gus, he led Maya out into the howling wind and rain towards his semi-truck. The cab was surprisingly clean and warm. As they pulled onto the highway, the world dissolved into a maelstrom of swirling rain and headlights. The journey was tense. Sal was a man of few words, focused intently on the treacherous road. The truck felt like a small, safe vessel in a raging sea.as they drove. Maya's thoughts drifted back to the man, Elias, and his daughter. She wondered if they had made it to his mother's house. She hoped Lily was tucked into a warm bed, her grandmother reading her a story. The thought brought a strange sense of peace, a fragile justification for her current predicament. It was a small act of kindness in a world that often felt cruel. Maybe that had to be enough. If stories like this, about the unexpected connections that bind us and the choices that define us, move you, there are many more waiting to be discovered. Consider subscribing to our channel to be part of a community that believes in the power of a single, human story. Miles away, in a sprawling, stately home in the Northwood suburbs, that same act of kindness was being dissected with forensic precision. Arthur Vance, a man who moved with the silent efficiency of a shadow, stood before Caspian Thorne. The fire crackled in the grate, casting dancing shadows on the walls of the library. Lily was finally asleep upstairs, in the care of Caspian's mother, a formidable woman who was blissfully unaware of her son's bizarre social experiment. Her name is Maya Rostova, Arthur began, his voice a low monotone as he read from a tablet. 24 years old. Her father, Mikhail Rostova, was a draftsman, deceased. Heart failure 6 years ago. Her mother, Anya Rostova, is currently a patient at Northwood General. She's suffering from a progressive autoimmune disorder. The medical bills are substantial. Caspian felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. Northwood General. His mother was on the board of that hospital. He had donated millions to its new cardiac wing. Go on. Maya Rostova is their sole source of support. She works 2, sometimes 3 part-time jobs. Waitress at the Daily Grind Cafe, transcriptionist for a legal firm online. She's also a student at Northwood Community College, studying architectural design. She's top of her class. The pieces began to click into place, each one more damning than the last. The portfolio, the desperation in her eyes. The interview. Caspian said, the word tasting like poison. Why was she coming to Northwood? Arthur swiped the screen. She had an interview scheduled for 9 a.m. tomorrow. A junior designer position. At Sterling Cross Architecture. Caspian swore, a sharp, violent curse. Sterling Cross was his chief rival in the sustainable development space. He knew their CEO, Marcus Sterling, a brilliant but ruthless architect who poached the best talent. A job that would have been life-changing for her. And she had given it up. For him. For his grounding exercise. She rescheduled. Caspian said, a sliver of hope in his voice. She told me her meeting was rescheduled. Arthur's expression was grim. That was a lie, sir. Our source inside the firm confirms she called to cancel, telling them she was stranded. They offered her a 10:30 slot as a one-time courtesy, but expressed that it was unlikely she could make it given the storm. The weight of it hit Caspian with the force of a physical blow. He sank into a leather armchair, rubbing his temples. The entire exercise had been designed to make him feel something, to break through the numb apathy that had enveloped him since Elena's death. It was working. He felt something now, a profound, gut-wrenching shame that he had played at poverty for a day and had been rescued by the genuine decency of someone who lived it every single day. Her quiet dignity was a rebuke to his entire life, to the bubble of privilege he had mistaken for reality. He had wanted to connect with the world, and in one evening, he had inadvertently conspired to ruin the life of the one person who had shown him genuine, unprompted compassion. Where is she now? Caspian demanded. Arthur consulted his tablet. This is the remarkable part, sir. She's resourceful. She found a truck driver at the station diner who agreed to take her as far as Crestwood. Our traffic analysis indicates they should be arriving at the Crestwood exit in approximately 40 minutes. 40 minutes, Caspian repeated. Crestwood was a half-hour drive from his mother's house. She'll be stranded there, in the middle of the night, in this storm. Correct, sir. Caspian stood up, pacing the room like a caged animal. The cozy library, a place of comfort and nostalgia, now felt like a prison of his own making. He looked at the family photos on the mantelpiece. Him and Elena on their wedding day, their faces alight with a future that now seemed like a cruel joke. A photo of Lily as a baby, so small and innocent. What kind of father was he? What kind of man had he become? He had set out to teach his daughter a lesson about life, and instead, Maya Rostova was teaching him one about character. Get the car ready, Arthur, Caspian said, his voice low and firm. The Range Rover, not the Bentley. Sir, you heard me. And get me Marcus Sterling's personal cell phone number. I'm going to make a call. What are you planning to do, sir? Arthur asked, a rare note of curiosity in his voice. Caspian stopped pacing and looked out the window at the raging storm. I'm going to fix this, he said, more to himself than to Arthur. I'm going to fix this, and I'm going to do it right. His masquerade as Elias was over. It was time for Caspian Thorne to step up. But he was beginning to realize that fixing this would require more than just money. It would require a piece of the humanity he had been so desperately searching for, the very humanity that Maya Rostova had just offered him for the price of a train ticket. The truck slowed, its air brakes hissing as it pulled onto the shoulder of the highway exit ramp. This is it, Sal said, gesturing to the desolate intersection ahead. A single, flickering street lamp cast a sickly yellow glow on a rain-lashed bus shelter. Beyond that, nothing but darkness and the wind-whipped trees. Crestwood exit. I can't take you any further. I understand, Maya said, her heart sinking. She had known this was the deal, but the reality of it was terrifying. Thank you, Sal. For everything. Stay safe, kid, he said, his gruff demeanor softening for a moment. World's a tough place. With those parting words, he was gone, the red taillights of his truck disappearing into the deluge. Maya scrambled into the flimsy bus shelter, the wind tearing at her coat. She was soaked, freezing, and 30 miles from her only hope. It was just after 3 a.m. She pulled out her phone. 7% battery. She tried to call a ride-sharing service. No cars available. Of course not. Who would be out in this? She was truly, utterly alone. Despair began to creep in again, cold and insidious. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was the universe telling her to give up. The memory of her father's tired face, the image of her mother's frail hands, the sound of Lily's quiet weeping. It all swirled in her head, a symphony of her failures. She leaned her head against the cold, vibrating plexiglass of the shelter and closed her eyes, a feeling of utter defeat washing over her. That's when she saw them. Headlights. A vehicle was pulling off the highway, slowing as it approached the exit. It wasn't a police car or an emergency vehicle. It was a large, dark SUV, a Range Rover, its powerful engine a low thrum beneath the storm's roar. It pulled up directly in front of the bus shelter, its headlights illuminating her, pinning her. In their glare like a frightened animal, fear, sharp and primal, shot through her. Who would be out here? Who would be stopping for her? Her mind flashed through every horror story she had ever heard. She clutched her portfolio to her chest, her knuckles white. The driver's side door opened. A tall man in a dark, expensive-looking raincoat stepped out. For a moment, his face was obscured by the shadows and the rain. Then he stepped into the light. Maya's breath hitched in her throat. It was him, Elias, but it wasn't him. Not really. The worn clothes were gone, replaced by a tailored suit that probably cost more than her mother's last hospital stay. The exhausted, defeated slump of his shoulders was gone, replaced by an aura of calm, commanding authority. The weariness in his eyes was still there, but it was different now. Deeper, more complex. This was not the struggling father from the train station. This was someone else entirely. He walked towards her, his expensive leather shoes splashing in the puddles. Maya Rostova, he said, his voice the same low rumble she remembered, but now it held a different timbre, a resonance of power. How? How do you know my name? She stammered, taking a half-step back. I made some inquiries, he said simply. You lied to me. Your meeting wasn't rescheduled. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. Maya felt a flush of shame, then a surge of anger. You're the one who is going to lecture me about lying? She retorted, her fear momentarily eclipsed by indignation. Who are you? What is all this? She gestured from his immaculate suit to the luxury vehicle purring behind him. He had the grace to look chagrined. You're right. I owe you an explanation. A very big one. But can we please have it in the car? You're freezing. Her survival instincts screamed at her not to get in the car with this stranger, this enigma. But looking at his face, she saw no threat. She saw the same eyes that had looked at his daughter with such love. And she was so cold. She gave a curt, hesitant nod that he opened the passenger door for her, and she slid into the buttery leather seat. The interior was warm and smelled faintly of wood and leather. It was a different universe. He got in the driver's seat, and, with the push of a button, the car hummed to life. He turned the heat up. My name, he said, turning to face her, is not Elias. It's Caspian Thorn. The name meant nothing to her. She was too exhausted, too overwhelmed by the sheer strangeness of the situation. She just stared at him. I'm the CEO of Thorn Industries, he added, as if that should clarify everything. It didn't. She had vaguely heard of the company, a tech giant involved in everything from software to urban development. But she couldn't connect that abstract corporate entity with the man sitting next to her. I don't understand, she said. Why were you at the station? Why the clothes? Why the lies? Caspian sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of the world. It's complicated. I lost my wife a year ago. I've been struggling to connect with my daughter, Lily. My therapist suggested I try to experience the world without the buffer of my name and my money. To be normal for a day. It was a foolish, arrogant idea, and I am profoundly sorry that you were caught in the middle of it. Maya listened, her mind struggling to process the information. A millionaire CEO playing dress up. It was absurd. It was insulting. All her struggles, her mother's illness, her desperate scramble for a future. It was just a backdrop for his therapeutic exercise. The anger returned, hot and sharp. So, what? This was a game for you, she asked, her voice trembling with barely suppressed rage. You wanted to see how the other half lives? Well, congratulations, you got a front row seat. I hope you enjoyed the show. It almost cost me everything. I know, he said, his voice quiet. I know what you gave up. The interview at Sterling Cross. I know about your mother. Her name is Anya. She's at Northwood General. This new information was a shock, a violation. You investigated me? I had to find you, he insisted. I had to understand what you sacrificed. Maya, what you did back there, no one has ever done anything like that for me. Not without wanting something in return. You showed my daughter, and me, a kindness I thought was extinct. He reached into the back seat and pulled out a small, worn teddy bear. Lily's bear. Lily wanted you to have this, he said, holding it out to her. She said she has lots of teddy bears, but you might only have one. And she said to tell you thank you, from the angel. Maya stared at the bear. The simple, heartfelt gesture from the child cut through her anger. She took it, its worn fur soft, against her cold fingers. A tear she hadn't realized was forming slipped down her cheek. I'm not an angel, she whispered. I'm just tired. I know, Caspian said softly. Which is why we need to get you to your interview. He put the car in drive and pulled smoothly back onto the highway. I made a phone call. A phone call, too. Marcus Sterling, Caspian said. The CEO of Sterling Cross. He's an old rival of mine. I told him a bit about the situation. Not the details about me, just that an extraordinary candidate of his was stranded by the storm, and that if he didn't hold her spot, I would personally hire you and build a new architectural division at Thorn Industries just to compete with him. Maya's jaw dropped. You threatened him? A faint smile touched Caspian's lips. I strongly incentivized him. He agreed it was in his best interest to be flexible. Your interview is still at 10:30, and he's very, very eager to meet you. The rest of the drive was a blur. Caspian didn't press her with more conversation, sensing she needed time to process. The powerful SUV cut through the storm as if it were a minor inconvenience. They arrived in Northwood as the first gray light of dawn was breaking through the clouds. The rain had softened to a drizzle. He didn't drive her to the Sterling Cross building. Instead, he pulled up in front of a charming, upscale hotel. I booked you a room here for the next few days, he said, cutting off her protest before it could start. There's a change of clothes waiting for you. I had my assistant guess your size. I hope it's right. Get some sleep. Have a hot shower. Order some breakfast. There's a car that will take you to your interview at 10. He handed her a key card and a new, pristine-looking portfolio case. I also took the liberty of having your portfolio professionally scanned and digitized. Just in case. A backup plan is always wise. She looked at him, at this man who had turned her world upside down twice in less than 12 hours. He was a paradox of immense power and newfound humility. Why are you doing all of this? Caspian met her gaze, and for the first time, she saw past the CEO, past the grieving husband, and saw the man who was simply Lily's father. Because you didn't see a bum or a threat at the station. You saw a father who was struggling. You gave up your dream to help him. The least I can do is help you get it back. This isn't charity, Maya. This is a debt, and I always pay my debts. He didn't wait for a thank you. He just nodded, and with a quiet, good luck, Maya, he drove away, leaving her on the curb, holding a teddy bear, a hotel key, and the keys to a future she thought she had lost forever. As she walked into the warm, elegant lobby of the hotel, she realized this was far from over. This wasn't just about an interview anymore. Her life had just become entangled with one of the most powerful men in the country, and she had a feeling that the consequences of her single act of kindness were only just beginning to unfold. The hotel room was bigger than her entire apartment. A king-sized bed with a mountain of pillows sat in the center of the room. On it, laid out neatly, was a simple but elegant pantsuit in a deep navy blue, a crisp white blouse, and a pair of sensible but stylish heels. It was exactly her size. The quiet efficiency of Caspian Thorn was both impressive and unsettling. After the best shower of her life, Maya stood in front of the mirror. The woman looking back at her was different from the one who had left home yesterday. The exhaustion was still there, deep in her bones, but it was overlaid with a strange, nervous energy. She was no longer just Maya Rostova, the struggling daughter. She was Maya Rostova, the woman who had inadvertently lectured a billionaire CEO on his life choices. The thought was both terrifying and strangely empowering. She aced the interview, fueled by a potent combination of adrenaline, gratitude, and a defiant sense of purpose. She walked into Sterling Cross with a confidence she had never felt before. Marcus Sterling himself, a man with piercing blue eyes and a reputation for being an architectural titan, conducted the final part of the interview. He was intrigued by her portfolio, but he was more intrigued by the story Caspian Thorn had spun. Caspian Thorn doesn't make calls on behalf of junior designers, Sterling said, leaning back in his chair, his eyes appraising her. He's a shark. If he's interested in you, I should be too. So tell me, Ms. Rostova, what makes you so special? Instead of being intimidated, Maya found her voice. She didn't mention the train station or the disguise. She spoke about her father, about his philosophy of creating shelter for the soul. She spoke about sustainable design not as a buzzword, but as a moral imperative. She spoke with a passion and clarity born from years of quiet study and hard-won conviction. She walked out of the building with a job offer, not as a junior designer, but as a project lead on a new community housing initiative. It was her dream job. The salary was more money than she had ever imagined earning. It was enough for her mother's treatments, enough to move them into a better apartment, enough to finally breathe. Her first call was to her mother. The joy in her mother's voice was the sweetest sound she had ever heard. Her second call was supposed to be to Caspian, to thank him. But she hesitated. What did you say to the man who had changed your life with a wave of his hand? Thank you felt hopelessly insufficient. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Maya threw herself into her new job with a ferocious dedication. She was good at it. Her ideas were fresh, innovative, and deeply empathetic. She was a rising star at the firm. Marcus Sterling was thrilled, often remarking that stealing her from under Caspian Thorn's nose was one of his greatest career triumphs. She and Caspian settled into an unspoken, arm's-length rhythm. He had arranged for her mother to be seen by the best specialists at Northwood General, personally covering all the costs that insurance didn't. He sent weekly updates, brief and professional, about her mother's progress. He never mentioned the train station. He never called. The teddy bear sat on Maya's new desk, a silent reminder of the strange, surreal night that had changed everything. But the story wasn't over. There were threads left dangling, secrets yet to be revealed. One evening, while working late, Maya was going over the schematics for a new low-income housing project. The site was a derelict plot of land on the south side of the city, a place that had been abandoned for years. As she pulled up the old city planning documents, she found the original surveyor's reports from over 20 years ago, and she saw a name that made her blood run cold. The lead draftsman on the original, failed development project for that very same plot of land was Mikhail Rostova. Her father. She dug deeper, her hands shaking as she scrolled through digitized archives. She found old company memos, financial reports, letters. Her father hadn't just been a draftsman on the project. He had been its chief architect, its soul. It was his first big break, a project to build beautiful, affordable housing for the community. And the company that had hired him, the company that had ultimately bankrupted the project, leaving her father's reputation in tatters and their family in financial ruin, was a fledgling real estate development firm called Thorn Properties. Caspian Thorn's first company. The room spun. It couldn't be. It was too much of a coincidence. The man who had, in a single day, saved her from the consequences of her own kindness, was also the man whose business dealings had destroyed her father and set their family on a path of hardship and grief. The irony was so staggering, so cruel. It felt like a punch to the gut. All this time, she had seen him as a flawed but ultimately benevolent figure, a man repaying a debt. Now, she saw something else entirely. She saw the architect of her family's original tragedy. Her mind raced back to the train station. The feeling she'd had when their hands touched. That bizarre hum of recognition. Had some part of her subconscious known? Had the ghost of her father's past been there in that station with them? The question was no longer what she would say to him. The question was what he had known. Had he known who she was all along? Was this whole elaborate rescue not an act of repentance for one night of deception, but for a lifetime of it? The job, her mother's care, was it all just guilt money, a way to silence a ghost from his past? The warmth and gratitude she had felt towards him curdled into a cold, bitter suspicion. She had to see him. She had to confront him. She picked up her phone, her fingers dialing the number he had given her, the number she had been too intimidated to use. This time, she wasn't calling to say thank you. She was calling to demand the truth. The confrontation took place not in a sterile boardroom or a fancy restaurant, but in a place that held meaning for them both, though Maya didn't know it yet. Caspian, sensing the cold fury in her voiceover, the phone, suggested they meet at the children's wing of Northwood General, the wing his company had funded, the wing where his late wife, Elena, had spent her final days. Maya arrived first, her heart a cold, heavy stone in her chest. The wing was unlike any hospital she had ever seen. The walls were painted with vibrant murals of forests and oceans. A massive, sculpted tree stood in the center of the atrium, its branches hung with colorful paper cranes made by the young patients. It was a place designed to soothe fear and inspire hope. And it was all paid for by the man who had crushed her father's dreams. Caspian found her standing before the tree, her arms wrapped around herself as if to hold herself together. He looked tired, older than he had just a few weeks ago. The CEO's swagger was gone, replaced by a deep, weary sorrow. Maya, he began, his voice soft. You found out. It wasn't a question. He knew. Did you know? She asked, her voice dangerously quiet. When you found me at that bus stop, did you know I was Mikhail Rostova's daughter? Caspian flinched as if she had struck him. No, he said, his voice raw. I swear to you, no. I didn't make the connection until Arthur brought me your file. When I saw your father's name, it was like a ghost had walked into the room. A ghost you created, Maya shot back, her voice rising. My father poured his soul into that project. It was his masterpiece. He designed homes, not just units. He believed in you. And you bankrupted him. You ruined him. Tears streamed down. Her face now hot and angry. He never recovered. He talked about it for years, about the promises that were broken, the corners that were cut behind his back. He died thinking he was a failure. Do you have any idea what that does to a family? Caspian didn't defend himself. He just stood there and took it, his face a mask of pain. Yes, he said finally, his voice thick with emotion. I do know. I was there. I was 26 years old, arrogant, and in way over my head. I trusted the wrong partners. They were cutting corners, using substandard materials. Your father found out. He came to me with proof. He told me we had to stop, to rebuild, to do it right. He looked away, towards the mural of the ocean. I should have listened to him. He was right. He was the most honorable man I had ever met. But my partners, they had me leveraged. They threatened to ruin me, to bury the company. I was a coward. I let them push him out. I told myself it was just business. A few months later, the whole project collapsed under the weight of their fraud, and I was left with the wreckage. It was the biggest failure of my life. He turned back to her, his eyes shining with unshed tears. I tried to find him afterwards, to apologize, to make it right. But he and your mother had moved, disappeared. I never forgot his name, Maya. Mikhail Rostova. It's been a stone in my shoe for 25 years. The raw confession hung in the air between them. It wasn't the excuse she had expected. It was a story of regret, of a youthful failure that had haunted him for decades. Her anger began to recede, replaced by a confusing swirl of emotions. So when you saw my name in that file, she whispered. It felt like fate, Caspian said. Like a second chance. Not to erase what I did, I can never do that. But to honor the man I failed. To help his daughter realize her own dreams. The job, your mother's care, it wasn't guilt money, Maya. It was an attempt at redemption. A poor one, I know. But it was all I had to offer. He took a hesitant step closer. Your father was a great man. He saw architecture as a way to build a better world. When I read your portfolio, I saw the same spirit, the same soul. He would be so incredibly proud of you." Hearing him speak of her father with such reverence, with such profound regret, broke something open inside her. The hatred she had been nursing, the simple narrative of villain and victim, dissolved. The truth was far more complicated, far more human. He wasn't a monster. He was a man who had made a terrible mistake and had been living with the consequences ever since. "This wing," she said, gesturing to the beautiful space around them. "Elena's wing." Caspian nodded, his gaze distant. Elena was an artist. She believed in beauty and kindness. She was a lot like you. Before she died, she made me promise to use my power for more than just profit, to build things that mattered. This was the first. And then Maya understood. Her act of kindness at the train station hadn't just been a chance for him to repay an old debt to her father. It had been a sign for him, a reminder of his promise to his dying wife. In helping a stranger, Maya had inadvertently shown him the path he was meant to be on. Their lives weren't just tangled by a past tragedy. They were connected by a shared belief in building a better world, a legacy inherited from the people they had loved and lost. She looked at the paper cranes on the tree, symbols of hope and healing. She looked at Caspian Thorne, the powerful CEO who seemed so small and vulnerable in this place of profound love and loss. The cycle of anger and grief was over. It was time for a new one to begin, one of healing, one of forgiveness. "My father," she said, her voice clear and steady now. "He had a final design, one he never got to build. A community center with a library and a rooftop garden. He said every neighborhood deserved a place for its soul to grow." Caspian looked at her, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "Tell me about it," he said to in the weeks that followed. Something remarkable happened. Maya didn't quit her job at Sterling Cross. Instead, she brokered a meeting between Marcus Sterling and Caspian Thorne, two titans who had been bitter rivals for years. She laid out her father's vision for the community center, on the very same plot of land where his dreams had once died. It was a bold, audacious move, but fueled by her conviction and Caspian's quiet, powerful backing, it worked. They agreed to a joint venture, a nonprofit project co-funded by Thorne Industries and Sterling Cross Architecture, with Maya at the helm. It was unprecedented. It sent shockwaves through the industry. Caspian stepped back from the day-to-day running of his empire, pouring his energy and resources into the newly formed Thorne Rostova Foundation, its mission to fund community-focused architectural projects across the country. He wasn't just writing checks. He was on site, talking to residents, listening to their needs. He was finally building things that mattered. He started bringing Lily with him, not in disguise, but as himself. And for the first time, the little girl saw her father not as a distant, powerful figure, but as a man who built libraries and gardens for people. She started smiling again, a real, genuine smile. Maya found her true calling, not just as an architect, but as a leader. She was no longer haunted by her father's legacy. She was fulfilling it. Her mother's health stabilized. With the best care and the absence of crushing financial stress, the light returned to her eyes. She would often visit the construction site, watching her daughter command the respect of engineers and city planners, her heart swelling with a pride that was the best medicine of all, the story of the train station, of the CEO in disguise, and the kind woman who gave up her ticket became a quiet legend within their inner circle. It was a reminder of the strange, unpredictable currents of fate that connect us all. One day, standing on the rooftop garden of the nearly completed Mikhail Rostova Community Center, looking out over the city, Maya turned to Caspian. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I had just gotten on that train?" she asked. Caspian looked at the thriving garden, at the children's library visible through the glass doors, at the life that was blooming in a place once defined by failure. "I used to think my life was a series of calculated decisions," he said. "Now I think it's a series of chances. Chances to be better, to do better. You gave me a chance, Maya, not just a train ticket." The transformation was complete. For Maya, it was the journey from a life of quiet desperation to one of profound purpose. She had learned that her compassion was not a weakness, but her greatest strength. For Caspian, it was a redemption arc that went far beyond repaying a debt. He had shed the skin of the ruthless CEO to become a man his wife and daughter could be proud of, a man his younger self should have been. He had learned that true wealth isn't measured in stock prices, but in the lives you touch. The community center opened on a bright, sunny afternoon. Anya and Lily stood side by side, cutting the ribbon. Gus and Sal, the truckers, were there in the front row, invited as guests of honor. The whole community came out to celebrate this beautiful new space, a testament to the idea that there is no plot of land, no life, that cannot be reclaimed and made to flourish. Some say this was fate, a cosmic debt being repaid across generations. Others call it choice, the result of a single, human decision to show kindness in a moment of despair. Perhaps the truth is somewhere in between. Maya Rostova's story reminds us that we can never truly know the impact of our choices, the hidden stories of the strangers we meet, or the incredible power of a single act of compassion to not only change a life, but to redeem a past and build a better future. What do you think? Was it destiny or decision? Let us know in the comments below.